Welcome to Negotiation with Alice, your negotiation podcast. Everything that you do where you need to get on the same page with someone else is a negotiation. So whether you have to negotiate a contract with someone, or you simply need your boss to sign off on that program that you'd like to implement, or you want to figure out how to rebalance the chore structure in your home, or talk about what vacation you want to go on. All of these things are negotiations. So in my podcast, we go over both personal and professional conversations, which all are considered negotiation, and I will give you tips on how to come out ahead. Welcome to the show. Welcome to another episode of Negotiation with Alice. Today I have Manisha Patel with us from the other side of the country from where I am. Welcome, Manisha.
Hi, Alice. Thank you so much for having me. Yes, I'm in North Carolina.
That's so wonderful. So, Manisha, I would love for you to let our listeners know who you work with and what it is that you do.
Yeah, so my name is Manisha Patel. I am a collaborative family law attorney. I'm a certified family financial mediator as well in North Carolina. I have my own law firm. I wouldn't say I'm a true solo. I have an outstanding paralegal that makes my world run, and I'm primarily in the alternative dispute resolution field, with a little bit of litigation in my family law practice.
So, Manisha, for people who are not aware of collaborative divorce, can you talk a little bit about that for them so that they understand that that exists? And for people who are thinking about divorce, that they can understand like that that's an option.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm very passionate about collaborative family law. So where it comes from, it's rooted in the Uniform Civil Collaborative Law Act, which majority of the states in the country have adopted, North Carolina in 2020. And what it is, it's a form of alternative dispute resolution, and it's essentially a process where they have a few key hallmarks. One, you sign a collaborative pledge, which everyone agrees, the attorneys and the parties, that you do not litigate. You agree not to file any court lawsuits. The other piece is that everything is full disclosure. There's no hiding things in your back pocket. Everyone comes to the table. And the third piece is, if you do end the process to work collaboratively through without court, then if you do choose to end the process and go to litigation, go with the court system, your collaborative attorneys are barred. They cannot be your court litigation attorneys. So those are the big hallmarks of the process. And the goal is to focus on what are the parties, the parent, co-parents, what are their needs? What are their interests, their unmet needs? How do we make those requests? Focus on the feelings and come to some sort of resolution, some agreement. And I find it such a beneficial option for families transitioning into two households, that it has been an invaluable process that I see is so helpful for families in the long term.
And that's a great segue into what we're going to talk about today, because Manisha and I are going to talk about ways of negotiation. And one of those ways is interest-based versus positional bargaining. So Manisha, if you want to talk about the difference between those, as well as how you're using it in your collaborative law practice, that'd be great.
Absolutely. So positional, I'll start with that. That's what we really see. And I use the examples of like those shows, like Divorce Court or Judge Judy, or what you see going in the court system. This is my position. I want 100% sole legal physical custody, and there is no bending that position. And this is what I'm going to argue for. This is the evidence I'm going to present, all to make this happen, to get to achieve my position at the end. And it can be very aggressive, it can be very adversarial. And through the collaborative process, we try to bring that down. It's already a stressful time. And when we're working through different legal issues, surrounding a family, um, it really just brings families, individuals further apart. And so with interest-based negotiations, we're looking at what are the goals? What are the goals of each person, each separated spouse, each co-parent? Let's talk about how can we craft some resolution so that everyone's interests are met. What are those unmet needs? How can we craft this resolution, discuss it to have those needs met? And it's a lot of discussion, negotiation, if you will. And we through this collaborative process, one of the key tools in our toolbox is using nonviolent communication. I'm not sure if you're familiar, if the listeners are familiar with nonviolent communication, but Dr. Marshall Rosenberg developed or is the father, if you will, of nonviolent communication. And it's a way to express those positions that people do have or those interests, but in a way where it can be welcoming and it eases the heavy emotions, because as people know, there are so many emotions. And so through the interest-based model, we focus on those types of things, the goals, and then we work towards gathering information, brainstorming solutions, and then finding some sort of resolution, whether it's a middle ground or there's some give and take to have everyone's goals, interests met, however that goes through the process.
I have so many questions. So my listeners who are not familiar with nonviolent communication, so are you suggesting that you as the attorney use that, or do you train your clients to use nonviolent communication so that they can talk to their soon-to-be ex to get to the bottom of common interests?
So I practice it. I've been practicing it consistently in my professional and personal life for about 7 years. No, a little longer than about 8 years now. And through that practice, I'm not an expert by any means, but I have been using it. So I coach my clients on how to reframe the way they communicate with their co-parent or their separated spouse through this collaborative process to help them kind of not take that positional based model of negotiation, that we're observing what the actual people on the collaborative team are experiencing. We are asking, what are your needs or unmet needs? We're asking, I'm observing. I often abbreviate to OFNR based on Marshall Rosenberg, that we're observing. We're looking at what do the observations make us feel? What are the needs? What are those met needs, unmet needs? And what are the requests to make that your needs are being met? And so it's very formulaic, and I have like a one cheat sheet from the nonviolent communication community, and I use that, and oftentimes I keep it at our conference table. So during our collaborative sessions, people have that resource, and it's just, as you keep doing it, the more it becomes second nature. And I find that in the beginning, clients have a really difficult time doing that, changing that method of communication. And so with the other collaborative attorney, we like to typically reframe if one of the parties, whether it's our own client or the other client, we often swap clients and reframe their statements using nonviolent communication, especially at the beginning. And then through that, eventually they don't need that reframing. They don't need that coaching because it's become a second nature to them through the process.
Yeah, I mean, I love Marshall Rosenberg's framework and I use it all the time. What I find interesting for me is that I feel like it's almost a misnomer because it's got the word violent, right? Right? And
Mm-hmm.
people say to themselves, well, I'm not a violent communicator, so therefore, why do I need nonviolent communication, right? But
Oh
I
yeah.
feel like it is a framework that absolutely would benefit every single person on the
Mm-hmm.
planet
Oh
if they did
yeah.
it. And it is difficult in the beginning because it's asking you to really pinpoint the vulnerable emotions
Mm-hmm.
what you're truly feeling, that maybe you flipped it into anger or you
Mm-hmm.
flipped it into accusation or blame, right? And it's asking you, what's really going on with you? What's really the feeling that you
Yeah.
have that you're trying not to show? So it does do that. So back to the interest space. Let's do a case study, right? So one of the
Okay.
things I've seen frequently, not so much in divorce, but just amongst parents, and I want to use this as a demonstration to figure out positions versus interests.
Yeah.
So parents are frequently fighting about public school or private school for their
Mm-hmm.
kids, right? So the position is what, Manisha? Go ahead and state the position.
So a position, I'll take a position. So a position is I want my kids to go to private school because they have the best school grades, they have the greatest college acceptance rates, and this is where our children will thrive with smaller classes and dedicated teachers for smaller class sizes.
Now, we might say, like, let's say I'm the other parent, and I might say, well, I have the kid's best interest. And in my opinion, public school is better because there's a diverse population and it's within walking distance and it doesn't cost anything, right? But the position that the other parent might have is public school, best interest of the kids, and here's the reason why. So how can we have people get to the interests
Right.
so that there is some kind of commonality so that they can get to a resolution?
So oftentimes how I go about this is we hear those positions or meeting with our own clients, we know what their positions are. And when we start the conversation with each collaborative law session with the team, meaning each co parent and the attorneys, we ask what are the issues on the minds of the participants. That is always the first question we ask, and we go around the table and talk about it. And I think that takes the legs out of that position based perspective from the outset, because we're talking about goals. What are your goals for today's session? And let's say we're talking about school choice at this session. What, if someone's goals are, okay, I want them to be in a more diverse school system, I want them to um, I'm looking for their best interest, and it costs no money. Well, with that, I would ask them, can you reframe that in the place where why? Why do you think this has, you know, the best diversity or diverse experience? Why do you think this is going to be in your children's best interest? And asking some of those questions to reframe those positions. And I also I have like an NVC, a nonviolent communication cheat sheet I keep on the desk, and I ask, use this framework. Let's reframe this and use this framework to express the why behind this position. And oftentimes, when we ask that question about what is your why, that gets us down to the root of what are your interests and goals out of to achieve. And that helps people with that paradigm shift from positional to interest based.
So, for example, in your position, which is private schools, and if we're going to walk through this scenario all the way through, and I ask, okay, well, why? Why is it that you feel like a private school would be best for the kids in their best interests? And why do you feel like it gives you the best education? What are some of the answers that might come up? I'm trying to help the audience and the listeners understand, like, how can we get to a resolution if we're both feeling like we're working towards the best interest
Right.
and we're not picking the same thing.
Right. So part of that why can be they have the most rigorous academic program in the county. They are our children need to be challenged, and having this rigorous academic program will help them achieve greater outcome, because let's say they desire to go to college, they want to go to a professional school. Well, this is why my interest is for them to have a challenging academic course load so that their future goals can be achieved. And this is why I think this private school option is going to be in their best interest.
Okay, great. And so then when you ask the other parent, let's say that they say, okay, well, we can find a public school that will have the same kind of rigor, except it'll be closer so that the kids don't spend an hour each way getting to and from school. Sort of, is that sort of how people negotiate via the interest-based model?
Absolutely. Through that, it opens up, once each person shares their why, I think it opens up the doors to have a more meaty discussion, if you will, and going into not in the weeds, but more into the details and the specifics of the why of each person's position. And then they actually will focus on, okay, we both want the best for our children. We both want what's going to be the best for their growth, their education development, and let's talk about this. And that's where we kind of shift into our brainstorming um, step, if you will, of the process. And let's brainstorm. Okay, well, this public school is what I thought you were talking about, but this public school does have advanced courses. It does have a great graduation rate. It does have a high college acceptance rate. Maybe we can consider that. And so I think once you have that discussion of the why, it opens the doors for the brainstorming to find a resolution through an interest-based model of negotiation.
Now, I would love to talk a little bit about how either attorneys, collaborative attorneys or mediators help people get to that interest based if they can't get to it on their own. Because we can talk about how to do interest based negotiation, but ultimately, if people are really, really wrapped up in their emotions and they feel really passionate about whatever it is that they're feeling passionate about, sometimes they have difficulty getting to the interest in a way where you can see some kind of common resolution, because they're just like really passionate and becoming more entrenched in their why. Like their why is like super important, and if they go to public school, there's no way they're ever going to get into like a great college or whatever it is. So talk to my listeners a little bit about how mediators or collaborative lawyers can help them get to the interest based if they're struggling to get there on their own.
I think part of that, and I've experienced that. I'll be completely honest. I've experienced that in so many of my collaborative cases, especially early on. And part of that, I will say, it goes to coaching. It goes to your collaborative attorney or your non-collaborative attorney to assist in shifting that mindset. And it's not always successful, and in those instances it's probably where I would bring in a mediator for one of our collaborative sessions as a neutral. And I think having a mediator who is familiar with that interest-based model is one, a complete neutral in the scenario, but they can help reframe, redirect into that. And I think what I've seen is once it's just done so repetitively, maybe not in the first collaborative session, maybe not in the second, but later on, people do find that ability. And oftentimes, I have prep meetings before our collaborative sessions, and then I have debriefs. I have a debrief with the other attorney. I have a debrief with my client, and then we talk about that. And if I recognize that they have just they're just set in their position, we talk about different ways to reframe their language so that during the collaborative session, it's much more open, it's more interest based, and we talk very openly. And that, I think a lot of that repetition eventually will get that person to just you know, kind of soften that position to be open of the other person's why, and try to find some middle ground, whether that's okay, let's try this public school this year, and then let's come back to a collaborative session after the school year's over if we can't decide amongst ourselves if this was the right choice. And I see that happen. A situation with homeschooling versus homeschooling, public school, private school. I literally just did this last year, so it's very on point and timely.
Yeah, I think what's really helpful is to try to, like you were talking about doing it slowly. Yes, doing it slowly, but also trying to move away from the end result, which is
Right,
private school versus public school versus homeschool. Like just
right,
moving away from that
yeah,
and saying like, okay, what are the values that we're holding?
hmm,
What are the things that we want? Not meaning that I want public school, that you want a
right,
rigorous education, or you want them to have access to, good colleges, or that you want them to have access to the arts, or like really talk
yeah,
more about the substance
yeah,
versus the end result,
yeah,
because the end result is the position.
right,
So, I think that people just need to pull away from the end result and really ask themselves, why do they want what they want?
right.
Because a lot of times those values are so to the person, they're so tied closely to the position.
Oh yeah,
I want my kids to go to private school, that I can't even articulate why. I can
right,
articulate super high level, like, well, I want them to have a good education,
hmm,
right? Because it's sort of like already the idea is already entwined
yeah,
in a good education, right? But to
right,
really, really stretch your mind, really look deeply as
yeah,
to like what is important,
right,
right? Is lots of free time important? Is it important that they're consorting with certain kinds of people? Is it important that they have diversity? Like really consider like what is really important and try to untangle that from the end result.
right. And a big piece of that is exactly what you said, slowing it down. And a lot of the times when we're working with people in the collaborative process who have a very difficult time in getting to the root of the interest, the why, we totally slow it down. I've spent a whole 2 hour collaborative session on the why because it's just like you said, it takes people time to put it into words on a literal level, not a high level. And I use different tools. I put up on the screen in my conference room just a checklist, or not, excuse me, not a checklist, like a brainstorming list or just a blank document, and I'll start typing in as people are talking. So it's a large visual, people can see this is what's important for this person, this is their why, and then let's go deeper. What beyond the why? And that oftentimes slowing that process down, spending more time on that really, really helps in that session to get them away from that end result. That end result, that's for the collaborative attorneys to draft a parenting agreement or a
Right.
separation agreement. That's what that part is. Right now, we're focusing on what are these interests and the root of why, and then let's come up with let's brainstorm. And I think that those are also very emotional, they're very heavy, and sometimes we'll spend a whole session on it, we'll spend multiple sessions on it, and then we even take breaks and have what we call a caucus, like a one-on-one with our client in separate rooms, or we just take a break. And oftentimes the other collaborative attorneys that I work with, we're on a really good wavelength that we know, all right, we need a bathroom break, we need a bio break. So let's all just take a couple minutes, get some fresh air, move our bodies, and then come back refreshed, and let's get back to it. And I think a lot of those times, slowing the process down, spending the time to dig into the why, and taking the break when it's needed really helps that discussion become fruitful, quite honestly, to move through the process.
And I know that we are framing it under like divorcing couples, but the position versus interest-based is a negotiation tool that anyone can use in any instance. So I don't want people to feel like, oh, well, if I'm not getting a divorce, this conversation doesn't pertain to me, because it very much does. And I think that if people use interest-based negotiation, there's always a way to find a win-win.
Mm-hmm.
When I first got trained as a mediator, my teacher said something to the effect of a really good mediated resolution is one where everyone is slightly unhappy because everyone has compromised. Now, I would, at this point in my mediation career, disagree with that. I feel like if you truly use interest-based negotiation and help your clients use interest-based negotiation, you can actually find a win-win. Even to the point that, let's say that it doesn't feel like a win-win to someone, like one side is getting everything and the other side is not. There's also ways to, I like to call it reframe.
Yep.
So that interest base is showing up again, but it's framed in a way that both parties feel like it is a win.
Mm-hmm.
Just for an example, I have a good example. I had a situation where someone was supposed to pay her soon-to-be ex-husband for half of the house, because in California, common, community property is 50-50. Yeah. He was like loath to do that because she paid for the entire house by herself during marriage. Yeah. So she's like, why do I have to give him another 50% because I already paid for it? So it was tearing her up, right?
Yeah.
At the same time, there's something that she wants, which is what? Her freedom. There's something that he wants, which is what? Half the house, right? Half the value of the house. And they can each get it, and it can be a win-win. So what I did is I reframed everything for her, and I said, look, this is not about whether he deserves this or not. It's not that. This is the price for your freedom. And the minute she saw it that way, she realized that it was a win, in fact, if she were to do that, because she desperately wanted her freedom.
Yeah.
In that moment, she suddenly was like, you're completely correct. That is right. And she freely and happily suddenly changed her mind and said, fine, I'm going to pay him because now I'm free. Yeah. Right. And so that is like interest-based, because you're trying to align both parties' interests. And sometimes you remind someone, hey, it might seem unfair, but actually you're gaining this thing that you desperately want. And sometimes you just don't see it. So you want to just keep them out, or you want to reframe the situation so that suddenly they realize this is a win-win, because I get something very precious and they get something very precious.
Absolutely.
And so I think it's a great tool to use in negotiations.
Oh yeah. And I've definitely used that as an attorney in a mediation, in a non-collaborative matter, non-collaborative case, where my client, we were at our 5th mediation session, and my client at 10 o'clock, we started at 9:30, 10 a.m., was ready to walk out. And I understood. It's been 5 mediations over the course of 4 months, no, longer than that, probably 6 months. And all that my client has been doing is writing a check to their separated spouse, and they wanted to be done. They wanted a resolution so they don't have to keep paying me. They don't have to keep taking off work, reworking their work schedule, to be done. And I reframed that, and I said, client, right now you've shared your goal is to be done, no more mediation sessions or go to court. And right now is our time. We have these last maybe 2 issues left. Let's work on this, work it through, and we can be done. We can be done today. And that's what you've shared from the outset. This is it. This is your last mediation you're willing to give time to. And 2 hours later, we had an agreement. When I reframed it from I'm walking out, they're not willing to give, they're going back on something we talked about 6 months ago, to you want this to be over. Let's have this over. And if this means, you haul away the items from the house that other spouse has cleared out so you can put the house on sale or first on the market, that's how we get your freedom from this court case. Yep. And it's amazing how that reframing of that interest, even if it's not at the forefront of the client's mind, how much that helps progress things forward.
Absolutely. Yes. I think it's great to use sort of those two in tandem, right? Interest-based and then reframe. The reframe typically takes a third party to try to see it from the outside perspective. But I think coupling those together is a really powerful tool in negotiation, because suddenly everyone sees the light of day and they're like, wait, we can both get what we want, because people don't necessarily want the same thing. You think you want the same thing, but if you figure out like, hey, I want A and you want B, let's exchange, and we both get what we want, that is the result of interest-based negotiations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think you're totally right about the win-win, because I heard the same thing when I had my mediation training. And I find that shifting to the interest-based model and using nonviolent communication, there is absolutely a way for a win-win. Absolutely.
Yes, I agree. This has been lovely, Manisha. Thank you so much for being here and sharing your thoughts and wisdom with everyone. If someone wanted to reach out to you, if they were looking for a collaborative divorce attorney or mediator in North Carolina, are you able to practice outside of North Carolina or just in North Carolina?
So I'm licensed in the Middle District of North Carolina federal courts, as well as all state courts in North Carolina. And so only right now in North Carolina, I'm a certified family financial mediator and a licensed attorney here as well.
And how can people reach you if they want to work?
So my website is www.lawofficeofmpp.com. The best way is to just fill out a contact form. There are multiple pages on there. It's on the main page. Just fill that little form out, and we usually get back to you within 1 business day. And then I also have a guidebook, a quick helpful tip giveaway, if you will, that I'll share the link with you to put in the notes about just a 10-step checklist about successfully navigating divorce in North Carolina. And I think it's pretty transferable in other states. It's just a helpful guide if you're thinking about it or wanting to prepare for a collaborative divorce, or even getting ready to meet with an attorney. It's a really helpful tool to just help have people gather the information or think about these things, to list out their questions or be prepared when they meet with an attorney.
Thank you so much for offering that to everyone. Yeah. So everyone, you can just check out the show notes. Manisha's information will be there, as well as the link to download the guide that she's offering to everyone. And this has been lovely. Thanks, Manisha, for joining us. And thank you, listeners, for joining us on yet another episode of Negotiation with Alice.
Thanks so much.